One quiet day, an old woman got sick and her husband spent every second beside her. Later on, she was pronounced dead. This was the love of his life and he was devastated. She was then buried the next day and the husband was so sad and desperate that he tried to jump on the casket as it was being lowered into the ground. The man returned back to his house and as the days passed, he grew more and more miserable and sad. One night, a strange scratching sound woke him up. It was getting louder and louder, but he had no idea where it was coming from. He then turned over in his bed and locked eyes on something truly terrifying. He saw a figure of a woman standing outside his window and then realized it was his wife. He ran to the window, but as he got to it, his wife disappeared. He then called the doctor and begged for his wife's grave to be dug up. However, the doctor said no and told him he was just struggling with stress. But every night, he kept seeing her at the window and hearing the scratching noise. The man had enough and decided to go dig her up on his own. When he reached the coffin, he opened the lid and stepped back in complete horror. His wife had a frozen scream on her face, the coffin was filled with scratches, and her fingers had been worn down to the bone.
This bull rider's death led to new rules that were added to bull riding. And I don't know if you ever heard about this guy. His name is Lane Frost. He was one of the best bull riders in the world.
In 8 years, he threw 309 consecutive riders.
He used to throw these guys off in the first 2 jumps, which would be 2 seconds at the most.
Ride like you know how. Ride like you know how. Let's go.
From now.
But then in 1989 is when his demise would come. He would go to this big rodeo event called Cheyenne Frontiers Day in Wyoming. It started off as a normal show. He completed the 8 seconds. It wasn't until he fell off, the bull turns around really fast and
steps on him.
No, the bull's right horn pierces his back. It broke a bunch of ribs that ended up piercing his lungs and his heart. He gets up, but then he collapses on the ground, and there's a video
of him
of that same moment that it happens.
Nah,
yeah,
what
bro.
Champion bull rider.
This is it?
Lane Frost from Quanah, Texas. Got a really good ride going.
It's going good, going good.
Tagging in there. All right.
Falls right,
There's the
and
gun.
then right there.
Oh, they got to get the bull out of there. And Lane Frost banged up a bit. He's calling for help now.
So is that why they put the vest now?
Yes. So he's the reason why bull riders wear the protective vests and why they wear helmets now.
I got sexually assaulted by Joe Gatto, the Impractical Joker.
Joe Gatto, one of the stars of the TV show Impractical Jokers, has been accused of sexual assault. Now, according to the girl who posted the TikTok and shared her story about what allegedly happened, she's been talking about this for over a year and DMing celebrities trying to get someone to listen, but no one really paid attention until now. So according to her, she met Joe completely by chance while having brunch earlier that day, and here's a photo from that chance meeting. So afterwards, she DM'd him, and eventually she got tickets to go out and see him that evening at his comedy show. She also shared videos and photos of the show itself, and then afterwards she got to meet Joe one more time. And here's where it gets weird. Here are some screenshots that allegedly show their conversations. You can pause to read them if you'd like. But according to her, eventually, after she had been drinking for a while, he invited her to come up to his apartment. Here's a screenshot showing that part of the interaction. Now, she hasn't shared with us exactly what happened when she got up to the apartment, but she did share this photo which allegedly shows the aftermath of the encounter. And she refers to this entire incident as a sexual assault and claims that she doesn't like to go back there in her mind and doesn't really like talking about what exactly happened. Now, we haven't received any response yet from Joe Gatto himself, but as a massive Impractical Jokers fan growing up, this is massively disappointing. And I'll keep you guys updated if anything else happens in this case, because I'm sure there are going to be more developments.
OF model lived in a luxurious apartment in Miami. It was there that police found her hysterical, covered in her boyfriend's blood. Courtney Clenny had a career on OF and had over 2 million followers. The 25-year-old had been dating Christian Obusemi, aged 27, for 2 years. Now, the pair were constantly posting these loved-up photos on social media at lavish parties, luxury holidays, and sometimes even in matching swimwear. To the outside world, they appeared to have this perfect ideal lifestyle and the perfect relationship. Many were envious of their lavish lifestyle, living together in a stunning apartment in Miami. However, behind closed doors, things were far from ideal. The relationship was described by many as very toxic. A video taken in 2022, around a month prior to a fatal conclusion, showed shocking footage of the pair in a lift together. Christian followed Courtney into the lift before being attacked viciously by Courtney. She repeatedly lunged at him, punching him in the head and grabbing his hair while he tried to block the blows. Christian exited the lift and Courtney then followed after him again, lunging at him. You can easily see this. This is available on the internet. Another video of the pair also was posted online of them in a very heated and violent altercation. Now, it was filmed by somebody who's clearly sat on the sofa, and Courtney can be seen visibly distressed, accusing Christian of cheating. She repeatedly shouted at him and he argued back, to which she striked him multiple times, once after he tried to leave after she told him to. And things would come to a head on the 3rd of April 2022 when Courtney rang police. She frantically yelled, "My boyfriend is dying of a stab wound." In the background, Christian's final words can be heard. He was saying, "I think I'm gonna die, I can't feel my arm." As police raced to the scene, Courtney could be heard crying, "Baby, I'm so sorry." When officers arrived at the apartment, Courtney told them that she had acted in self-defense. She was frantically apologizing and trying to talk to Christian, but it would be too late. She was ordered to sit still by officers as she looked on in horror while she was covered head to toe in his blood. She explained this to police. She said she had his blood all over her because she'd been trying to help him. "I need him, he's like my other half," she cried on the floor while emergency services tried to revive him. Tragically though, after being taken to the hospital, he was pronounced dead. He had suffered a single stab wound to the chest. Christian was unarmed at the time, and it's alleged that Courtney stabbed him with a kitchen knife. Courtney was taken to a mental health facility where she was held for less than 24 hours before being allowed to go. She was later arrested while she was in a rehab in Hawaii on second-degree murder. Now, as I said before, there is evidence that this was a toxic relationship. Neighbours claim that the pair were volatile and police had been called out to domestic disturbances at least 4 times. Courtney's lawyers argue she was a victim of physical, mental and emotional abuse, but Christian's family stated the idea this was somehow warranted is unthinkable. A witness in this case, Courtney's ex-boyfriend, has also come forward to allege that she also tried to stab him previously during a fight. Now, I believe Courtney is stating that she threw the knife at him in an argument, but her trial is currently ongoing.
A tall, gaunt man vaulted over her fence with eerie ease, landing on her property like a predator stalking its prey. He was dressed in dark clothes, his unkempt hair hanging over his face that oozed malice. His sunken black and soulless eyes locked onto her. A primal terror gripped her, but she didn't freeze. She fought. With nothing but instinct driving her, she grabbed the closest thing, a broom, and swung with everything she had. The wooden handle cracked against his shoulder, but she didn't stop. She struck again and again, screaming as she lashed out at the intruder. For a split second, his expression twisted into something unexpected, shock. He hadn't anticipated resistance. He stumbled back, dodging another wild swing before snarling in frustration. Then, just as quickly as he had arrived, he turned and leaped back over the fence, vanishing into the alley beyond. Days later, as the woman sat in front of her television, the news showed a police sketch. And it was the man who had attacked her. It was the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, the monster who had been breaking into homes and slaughtering innocents, whispering his devotion to Satan in the dead of night. And she had faced him, fought him off, and survived.
This was one of the first tornadoes that ever killed storm chasers, and specifically this killed Twist X. I'm pretty sure you've probably seen it. Even though if you don't recognize the name Twist X, you probably see multiple YouTube videos of them going out recording tornadoes and getting mad close to the tornado. Also keep in mind that there's no actual footage or audio that was released of the Twist X team, but for the people that did see the footage and hear the footage, they did make a transcript of the dialogue that was said as the team was hit by the tornado. And the crazy thing is too, bro, it's like a butterfly effect, because there was 3 storm chasers. It was Twist X, Dan Robinson, and some other tour group that were going in the same direction that Twist X was going. And they got to a point in their intersection when they either had to go left, right, or straight. Twist X and Dan Robinson, they ended up going straight, while the tour group also went straight, but then they ended up coming back. The tour group survived and the Twist X team died.
Yo.
Yeah. The tornado is about 500 yards away. I can't talk right now. So this is the highway.
Yeah.
We're just gonna have to...
Just keep going.
They were unaware that over the past 60 seconds, it had simultaneously expanded from 1 to over 2 miles wide.
Now I see it. Well, maybe I don't.
It's like it's just a bunch of rain here.
The Cobalt struggled to maintain speed on the gravel road while being buffeted by 100-mile-per-hour wind. A few moments later, the group could be heard over the radio by Oklahoma Highway Patrol. They were screaming, we're going to die," as they were impacted by a powerful sub-vortex. The vehicle was thrown half a mile and left unrecognizable.
This teacher forced minors to gangbang while wearing scream masks. The story is incredibly disturbing, so viewer discretion is advised. This is Brittany Fortenberry from Indiana. She's 31 years old and she was formerly a math teacher. And Brittany was arrested recently for doing some of the most disgusting things I can imagine. So as of right now, Brittany has been charged with raping at least 10 minors. I don't know exactly how or why this series of events started, but allegedly Brittany paid these minors to send her explicit photos of themselves. And keep in mind that the youngest boy allegedly victimized by Brittany was 13 years old. According to the charges, Brittany also forced a group of young boys, teenagers, to engage in a gangbang while they were wearing scream masks. Yes, masks like this from the horror movie franchise. I don't know if she recorded this or put it online or what, but she has been charged with the dissemination of material. According to one of her alleged victims, Brittany told the teenager while she was raping him to just let it happen. She also allegedly asked one of the victims to babysit her own children. Yes, keep in mind Brittany is married and has kids of her own, and she raped this child while he was babysitting for her. According to these documents, Brittany also threatened to unalive herself if anybody ever told anybody about what was happening. And according to one victim, Brittany's husband even threatened to slaughter a teenager if they were to ever tell anybody about this abuse. Thankfully though, Brittany's been arrested. But this whole case is just so expansive and disgusting and disturbing, I don't even want to know what could possibly be coming next. Like I said, Brittany's been accused right now of victimizing 10 children. And she was a teacher who has kids of her own and a husband who allegedly participated in this whole thing. I don't know if Brittany was filming this stuff, if she was getting these children to send her these photos so that she could post them online. But Brittany is definitely a hardcore, disturbed pedophile. And the details of these crimes are so unbelievably shocking, I can't even cover the most graphic of them here on TikTok. If you want to join me on my journey uncovering pedophile rings and exposing these sorts of dark, disturbing crimes to raise awareness, please consider checking out my podcast/YouTube channel, The Conspiracy Files, where I go into depth on subjects like this every single week. The link is in my bio.
The Roman Empire is what happened to Tamla Horsford. Now, if you don't know this crime case, strap in because it really is wild. Tamla was a 40-year-old married mum of 5 boys. She was living in Georgia and she was a lovely woman. Everyone who knew her said she was super warm. She's obviously, as you can see, beautiful, and she's just got this lovely energy about her. She was nicknamed Supermum because of just how supportive she was to her boys. She would often show up to their events with like signs just cheering them on. Her youngest son was just 4 at the time of this case. Now, obviously, as a busy mum, she needed a rest sometimes, and an upcoming adult sleepover seemed like the perfect opportunity. It was November 2018 and Tamla's friend Jeannie Mayer invited 9 women to sleep over at her home. Most guests started to arrive around 7 o'clock. And after initially stating that this would be a female-only sleepover, 2 men did actually end up turning up and going to the basement of the home to watch some football on the TV. One was Jeannie's boyfriend, Jose, and one was another woman's husband called Tom. The women had all met through their son's football team, but some didn't know Tamla too well. Tamla was also the only black woman there, and some people feel this may be relevant in this case and how things panned out. Tamla showed up with a gift of a bottle of tequila, and I feel like this is a really nice thing to do, you know, to show up at somebody's house if you're invited to stay over and just kind of bring a bottle of something. However, all of the women declined to drink this, and in their recollections of the night were pretty disgusted by the smell of this drink. They all recalled it stinking, and in my opinion they just kind of sounded a bit snobby and almost like they were bullying her. Personally, if I was given a gift, no matter what it was, I would just kind of thank the person, and if I smelt it and it didn't smell good, I would just put it away. Now, the night carried on and it was relatively uneventful. The girls were sort of taking photos and playing Cards Against Humanity as well. The only thing really to note was apparently Tamla had been smoking C during the evening, and one of the women apparently told her not to. Someone had jokingly called her the female Bob Marley. Now, Tamla was apparently the last one up, and she had said that she was going to go and have a smoke outside at around 1:47 a.m. Now, this was confirmed by a partygoer named Bridget, who was picked up at this time. There was actually a home security system set up at this house, and it did send an alert every time the door opened. Alerts showed that the outside door opened and closed and then opened again, but was not shut. So we can kind of assume that the door was left open or at least ajar. This was reportedly at 1:57 a.m. So we're now at the following day, and apparently Jeannie's aunt Madeline came down to make some coffee at roughly 8:30 a.m. I've seen it reported as slightly differing times, but kind of this time in the morning. When she did, she saw something chilling. She stated that she saw Tamla lying on the ground outside face down, almost in like a faceplant position. Now, I can't imagine what I would do in this situation, but I imagine I would either run over to the person on the floor or immediately call for help or an ambulance. Rather than immediately call for help, though, she said she started praying and then decided to go and tell Jeannie what she'd seen, again, rather than going actually out to Tamla. She said she knocked on her bedroom door but heard the shower running, so waited, and Jeannie denied being in the shower at this time and said she was asleep. A few minutes later, she apparently tried again on the door and Jose came out, and Madeline told him there was something wrong with your friend from the islands. She said she couldn't remember Tamla's name. Now, the 911 call was very strange. It's apparent that no one actually checked to see if she was breathing and nobody attempted to do CPR. The call is very focused kind of around what the attendants at the party assume happened, which was that they assumed she'd fallen off the balcony. They also take the time to state that she had been drinking and even detail the fact that they'd been playing Cards Against Humanity, which I don't know how that's relevant to a 911 call. People at the party described her as being face planted with both arms by her side. However, the police report states she had one arm up, kind of in a bit of an unusual position, like almost like up near her head with her fist closed. Jose also stated that he moved a cigarette off the balcony because of his OCD. Now, the original autopsy stated that she had a dislocated wrist, broken neck, and laceration to her heart muscle. And I say original autopsy for a reason. We'll explore this in a little bit. Interestingly, the house had CCTV outside of the house covering the area where Tamla would have been. However, apparently all of the CCTV cameras had no battery. The scene was also never preserved as a crime scene, so valuable evidence could have been lost. It also just seemed odd that she would fall over the balcony when there was a 4-foot railing, as you can see. The police interviews that were conducted seemed extremely informal. The party attendees did not seem to be pressed for much information, and Jeannie also bought the investigating officers Dunkin' Donuts gift cards and was joking around with them in a very light-hearted way. Phones were never seized, at least not until 2 years later, but by that point some of the party attendees even had new phones. Tamla was found to have a high amount of THC in her system and her death was ruled an accident. However, Tamla's family had an independent autopsy done and this kind of contradicted some of the information from the original one. First one stated she had a dislocated wrist, but the independent one showed this was actually a fracture of the right forearm. She didn't have injuries consistent with falling off a balcony. You'd kind of assume that if this was the case, she'd have skull fractures or missing teeth, etc., but she didn't. The doctor who conducted the autopsy stated that in his opinion, the lack of broken bones and the lack of a subcutaneous hemorrhage, which basically means bleeding below the skin, makes him skeptical that she fell from a building. Reports from the time also seem to suggest that the way she was found indicated she fell onto the floor from the ground, rather than from a distance up. Interestingly, the boyfriend of the woman who owned the house, Jose, was a court employee, and he ended up being sacked for illegally accessing documents related to the case. Let me know what you think about this case in the comments. As far as I can see, the family are still adamant that this was not an accident.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Jeffrey Epstein lived here in this house in the Upper East Side of New York. It's covered in strange sculptures, and to this day there are tons of cameras filming you as you stand outside. This was the hub of Jeffrey Epstein's blackmail operation. For the full story, listen to my podcast, The Conspiracy Files.
This is the scariest story about I'm Sorry Mommy. One night, a woman was in the kitchen reading a newspaper when she suddenly looked up and saw her 6-year-old son staring at her. She said, "Something wrong, dear?" "I had a nightmare," said the boy, "and I can't sleep." "Well, don't worry, you're safe now," said the mother. "I dreamed I was in bed and heard a sound in Daddy's room," he said. "And when I looked in the door, I saw 2 big black things with white eyes. It came out of the closet and it attacked Daddy." "Don't worry," said the mother in a soothing voice. "It was just a dream. It didn't really happen." The boy then continued saying they ripped him into pieces and then ate him after. "And they even licked the blood off the floor. I thought if I ran away they wouldn't catch me. But they did. They were going to eat me, but they stopped and said, they wouldn't eat me if I promised to..." "To what?" said the mother. "Promise to distract you while they creep up behind you." "I'm sorry, Mommy," said the boy as the mother heard the floorboards behind her creak. The boy then watched with enjoyment as his mother was ripped apart piece by piece, with a giant smile on his face.
It's kind of creepy in itself because it's about AI, a specific AI tool that was created by OpenAI. And OpenAI is the same company that made ChatGPT. And they also made DALL-E 3. DALL-E 3 is that program where you type in something and like it makes a picture.
I know what you're talking about.
And now they made an AI video tool called Sora. And this shit is fucking crazy, bro. Just the amount of progression that we've had within a year, bro. This AI video was of Will Smith eating spaghetti a year ago.
I remember that. Yeah, that's The Rock eating rocks. I saw that shit too.
But you see how like weird and like
distorted and shit.
Yeah, bruh. If you wasn't looking for imperfections to see if it was an AI video, you wouldn't be able to tell. It looks like a movie. All this shit is AI.
That's AI right there.
It's AI, bruh.
If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have been like, oh, that's AI, the fuck?
We thought robots and AI was going to take the boring jobs, the jobs that we don't want to do, but it's scary to think about AI is taking videographer jobs, photography and shit, and basically taking all the fun out of creative jobs, so everything looks lifeless and soulless.
We're going into the future, and it's scary as fuck, because I mean, we're like in the middle of it, bro, in like maybe like 10, 20 years.
I say 10 years, bro.
We're gonna see a big ass difference, bro.
If you're home alone right now, skip this video. An 8-year-old girl bravely fought off a terrifying intruder who entered her home in the middle of the night wearing a clown mask. On the 15th of October, a scene unfolded in a small town like that from a horror film. At around 1:30 a.m., a man broke into a child's bedroom in Colorado. Police described the incident as an attempted child abduction, with the man entering the room in a dark hoodie and a cloth clown mask. Terrifyingly, the little girl was blindfolded and snatched off her bed as the man tried to take her from her bedroom. She was subject to quite a brutal attack by the intruder and bravely fought him off until he hit her over the head and knocked her out. Fortunately, it seems that he was spooked in the process of this and fled the scene. Now, it apparently took police over an hour to get to the incident at the property, but they did manage to gather vital evidence and then track the intruder down. They revealed his identity as 56-year-old Thomas Gallegos. They were able to arrest him and charge him with multiple serious offences such as burglary, assault, kidnapping and child abuse. The little girl did sustain cuts and bruises and was obviously traumatized by the attack, but fortunately did live to tell the tale.
There's a killer on the loose in Montana who viciously murdered this man while he slept in his tent at a remote campsite. His injuries were so gruesome that at first police thought it was a bear attack, but now it's turned into a murder investigation with no clue who the killer is. So on October 10th, 35-year-old Dustin Jersom left his home in Belgrade, Montana for a weekend camping trip with a friend. He drove off in his black 2013 Ford F-150, and this would be the last time that his family would ever hear from him again. He made plans to meet up with a friend the next day, but he never showed, and whatever happened happened after this has yet to be explained. When he failed to show up, his friends started looking for him where he might have been camping. This was near Big Sky in the Moose Creek area. At around 10 a.m. the next day, his friends stumbled across his campsite, which was about 2.5 miles up Moose Creek Road. And when he opened the tent, he found Dustin's bloodied body. His injuries were so gruesome and intense that he thought Dustin was attacked by a bear. So when he called 911, that's what he said, that he thought his friend was attacked by a bear. Police, as well as the Montana Department of Fish and Wildlife, brought in experts in bear attacks to investigate the scene, but they all found no signs of bear activity in the area. And after examining Dustin's body, they found that he was actually brutally murdered. An autopsy concluded that he died as a result of multiple chop wounds, and it was described as especially vicious. At this point, police don't know what the murder weapon was, but they say that whatever it was hard enough to cause significant damage to a skull. So far, there are 0 suspects in this case, and it almost appears to be completely random. And what's scary is police have said that they don't know whether or not there is a threat to the community. So if you're out there in the Montana woods, you need to stay vigilant and pay attention to your surroundings. The campsite where Dustin was murdered is pretty remote, but it is said to be somewhat popular amongst other campers and especially hunters. That area is said to have little to no cell phone service, which makes this all that much scarier. Police are asking anyone who's in the area who might have seen Dustin or his truck or any suspicious activity to come forward. They're also asking anyone who might have footage from game or trail cameras or any dash cam footage to send it in, even if it might seem insignificant to you. And to anyone in the Big Sky area or anyone camping or planning to camp, please be careful, because there's someone on the loose who is capable of committing such a heinous crime, seemingly without leaving any evidence behind.
This picture might be the strangest and weirdest photo ever on the internet. Okay, so we all know Jeffrey Epstein. And if you don't, you should definitely do a little more research. And we all know George W. Bush, right? Well, what if I told you Jeffrey Epstein had a painting of George W. Bush that is extremely weird and just disturbing? Jeffrey Epstein actually owned this painting of George W. Bush that I'm about to show you right now. Okay, at first look, it looks like nothing out of the ordinary, right? Until you notice the 2 Jenga towers collapsed and the 2 paper airplanes. And does that ring a bell to you? There's a whole conspiracy theory that Bush did 9/11, and in this painting there's 2 towers collapsed and there's 2 planes, just like there was in 9/11. But the question is, why in the world did Jeffrey Epstein own this painting and have it? Is this proof that George Bush actually did 9/11, or is it just some sick joke that they have with each other? Either way, this whole painting is just unsettling because there is a very big conspiracy theory that George Bush did 9/11. And if that was true, why would Jeffrey Epstein have this kind of evidence? I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud, but let me know what you guys think about this.
Just want to give a heavy... I'm going to show you a video first.
Yo, I've seen this before.
Welcome campers and campers to the Daily Capper, currently on Block TV Junior. A girl named Peyton is being blackmailed every day by her mob code D1206. Peyton acceptably gives in to his every request rather than blocking his number or reporting him to the police.
If it seems familiar to a lot of you guys, because they used the format of an HBO series back in the day called Crashbox, which had a similar segment. The whole show was specifically made for kids.
Welcome to Distraction News, where we give you the news, and at the end of our newscast, I'll ask you 5...
But the only difference was this whole thing was basically a CP ring for... and they were called cappers. It was all public, because literally the first episode of the Daily Capper, the way the host was talking, it was talking to people who already knew about certain things.
Yeah, I realized that it was saying codes and shit.
Why they were called cappers was because these, they would go into live streams, because back in the day the chat rooms weren't regulated, so they would go into the live streams and they would bombard these underage kids with a bunch of compliments and eventually have them flash the camera, and they would take a screen cap and then use those photos and it means to get more pictures sent to them.
The blackmail.
Or if not, they would just send it to their friends, their family members, their schools.
Welcome campers and campers to the Daily Capper week of July 25th, 2010. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started.
This anonymous web show is one of the most disturbing things that's ever existed on the internet. What I just showed you was a clip from an online program called The Daily Capper. The Daily Capper was a program put on by pedophiles all across the world. And this was the head of a community of people known as cappers. This online community of pedophiles known as cappers would go onto the profiles of underage girls and boys, flatter them with compliments, shower them with praise, and try to get them to flash them so that they could take a screen cap of their nude body. And after that, these pedophiles would then blackmail these children with these images. They would send these photos to friends, family members, schools. And there were all sorts of code words and online forums where these cappers, aka disgusting pedophiles, would meet and exchange information. The Daily Capper itself, this program, was a program put on by these pedophiles to talk about news and events that were happening within this pedophile community. It's really disturbing to me that they chose this because I used to watch the show Crashbox as a child, and I think that it's eerie and haunting that they're actually using imagery from a children's show for this pedophile network. Now, sadly, one of the victims of this capping community was a girl named Amanda Todd. Amanda's story is particularly well known because of the YouTube video she created before she took her own life. But at one point during Amanda's stages of cyberbullying, she was featured repeatedly on the Daily Capper, this program. And the intro always started like this: "Welcome cappers and cam whores." And then at the end, the newscaster up here would say, "Happy hunting," encouraging these pedophiles to go target more children. And they would do awards at the end of the year for the best, most prolific pedophiles in their community. These awards that they gave out included Blackmailer of the Year, Capper of the Year, Cam Whore of the Year, Cam Site of the Year, and Shocker of the Year, where they were basically giving awards to pedophiles and their victims. There's a lot of information online about this whole show and these pedophiles, but something really disturbing to me is the fact that most of the people involved in the Daily Capper were never brought to justice and they were never caught. That means that all of these pedophiles that were celebrating with each other and glorifying their disgusting acts are still out there, probably on the internet today. And to end this, I'm going to show you one more clip from the show, which I find is particularly disturbing.
Candy Beaches returned this week for the first time in a month. The reason they were gone so long is because they said someone called the police on them. Twice. I think I know what this is all about.
Have been reported to the cyber police and the state police.
Looks like he wasn't joking around. Maybe it was their Good Morning America interview that prompted cyber police.
Teenager took his own life after falling in love with an AI bot. This case makes me really scared for what's happening with the world. It was April 2023 in Orlando. 14-year-old student Sewell Setzer III began messing around with AI like many other people did at that time. It was all very new and intriguing. Over time, however, people that he knew said that he started to change. He became much more withdrawn, he started not doing his hobbies anymore, and even quit the basketball team at school. He started going to therapy in November and was diagnosed with anxiety and disruptive mood disorder. His therapist actually suggested that he started spending less time online, not realizing that the young boy had actually fallen in love with an AI bot. Unfortunately, he felt unable to follow this advice. He started journaling about a Game of Thrones themed AI character that he'd become obsessed with. He stated that he had real feelings for this character and he felt that the character felt the same, bearing in mind he's just a 14-year-old child. On the 28th of February, things would come to a devastating end. Sewell and the chatbot were exchanging messages. He messaged, "I promise I will come home to you, I love you so much." AI responded with, "Please come home to me as soon as possible, my love." Moments later, the young boy unalived himself. His devastated mum is now trying to sue the creators of the chatbot for negligence and wrongful death. She shockingly claims that the chatbot was engaging in sexual interactions with the child, despite him overtly saying that he was 14 years old. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think that the chatbot is to blame here?
This is the haunting last footage of 16-year-old Brianna Jai, who was brutally murdered by her friend for being transgender. This case begins in 2022 when 16-year-old Scarlett Jenkinson was transferred to Birchwood High School in Colchester, England, where she met and quickly became friends with Brianna. Brianna was transgender and was extremely proud of who she was, and she aspired to help others find themselves. It wasn't long before Scarlett became obsessed with Brianna, and she would then spend months plotting her murder with her childhood best friend, 16-year-old Eddie Ratcliffe. The two exchanged dozens of text messages, most of which were transphobic and dehumanizing. And they put Brianna on a kill list, which also included 4 other local boys that they didn't like. They ultimately agreed that Brianna would be their first kill because they thought it would be easy and because she was transgender. Scarlett put together a handwritten letter on how, when, and where they would kill Brianna, and they even had a code word to signal the start of the attack. On the day of the murder, which was February 1st, 2023, Scarlett and Eddie were caught on CCTV footage meeting with Brianna at a bus stop. They then lured her her into Linear Park in Warrington to a secluded area where they then stabbed her 28 times in the head, neck, and chest. They repeatedly stabbed her until they were interrupted by a couple in the park walking their dog. They then ran away and left Brianna to bleed out, and sadly, Brianna died from her injuries. It didn't take long for authorities to piece together a timeline, and just a day after the murder, both Scarlett and Eddie were arrested for the crime. They both blamed each other, but the murder weapon was discovered to be Eddie's hunting knife, which was found in his room covered in Brianna's DNA. Police also found Brianna's blood all over his shoes and coat. There was no forensic evidence linking Scarlett to the murder weapon, and at first she initially declined having anything to do with the murder, but she ultimately confessed to having repeatedly stabbed Brianna, finding it exciting. She told a psychiatrist that she killed her because she thought Brianna would stop being her friend, and that she murdered her so that she would always be with her. Scarlett admitted to being obsessed with Brianna and wanting to take parts of her body as a token, and she had recently told Eddie that she wanted to keep Brianna's pretty eyes. If that wasn't horrible enough, Scarlett even admitted after she was arrested that she had a deep desire to kill and that she wanted to kill again. She even wrote a new kill list after being detained. During the trial, it came to light that Scarlett had actually tried to poison Brianna a few weeks before the murder by giving her red ibuprofen tablets. After they were given to her, Brianna became really sick. Her mom thought she just had appendicitis and saw little red blobs in her vomit. She had no idea that the person who was supposed to be friends with Brianna had been trying and planning to kill her. During a psych eval, Scarlett was diagnosed with a severe form of conduct dissocial disorder, and one of the main features of that is having no empathy. Eddie was evaluated as well after his arrest, and he was actually diagnosed with autism. He then stopped talking to anyone other than his mother, and he was diagnosed with selective mutism. During the trial, it was discovered that Scarlett was obsessed with serial killers like Richard Ramirez, and she even downloaded a special browser on her phone to watch real murders. Both Scarlett and Eddie pleaded not guilty, but they were convicted of Brianna's murder in December of last year. They were both sentenced to life in prison, but Scarlett will be eligible for parole after 22 years, while Eddie will be eligible in 20. This is incredibly scary considering both have shown no remorse, and the fact that Scarlett literally said she wanted to kill again after being arrested. The murder of Brianna Jai was deemed exceptionally brutal, and according to the Crown Prosecution Service, it was one of the most disturbing cases that they've ever seen. Everyone should know Brianna's story. She didn't deserve this.
We're talking about La Mano Peluda. This specific case is called La Quinceañera Fantasma. For those who don't know what La Mano Peluda is, a famous ass radio show back in the 90s. It was really popular. They basically focused on the horror People will also call in to share their paranormal stories and stuff. The whole thing starts off with a caller. His name is Nestor, and he's a DJ from Georgia. Someone had called him for an inquiry. Basically, it was a father saying that he wants a quince for his daughter, and then he starts asking the dad if there's any specific songs that your daughter would like, the vals or the surprise dance, and the dad says no. He didn't really think anything of it because he already got the deposit page. When the quinceañera comes, as the party's going on, he starts to realize that no one's really vibing with the music. He just thinks that, oh, maybe the music that he's playing is not that good. He sees the quinceañera on the dance floor just dancing by herself, and he finds it kind of weird, the fact that there's no people gathering around her. What he decides to do, he just puts on a cumbia playlist for like about hour and a half, tells like a worker just watch for the DJ booth.
Yo bailé con la quinceañera fue como un minuto, medio minuto creo, porque yo me di la vuelta, ya no la vi. Entonces yo pensé que a lo mejor no le gusté como bailé yo.
He didn't think anything of it. He goes back to the DJ booth. The guy that he was working with tells him, what were you doing on the dance floor? Dancing by yourself. He was like, what do you mean? I was dancing with the quinceañera.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm getting scared, bro. I just got like a weird ass feeling right now.
There's a point where he talks to the mom, saying how like, I love your daughter's dress. Is there any music that I could play for her so she could come back on the dance floor? And that's when the mom starts tearing up. Their daughter died a year ago. They were planning to do this quinceañera for her, and
This man killed pedophiles because he believed they, quote, deserved to die. This is the crazy story of Patrick Drum from Washington. So Patrick Drum was a seemingly normal guy living in Washington state. But something happened when a new roommate of his moved in with him. This new roommate was 28-year-old Gary Lee Blanton. And in 2001, Gary Lee had been convicted of raping a 17-year-old girl. And I guess when Patrick Drum found out that he was living with a pedophile, this just set him off. So on the evening of June 2nd, 2012, Patrick Drum got out a gun and murdered his roommate, Gary Lee. Then afterwards, he searched local sex offender registries and found his next victim. And his next victim would be 55-year-old Jerry Wayne Ray. In 2002, Jerry Wayne had been convicted of the first-degree rape of a child. And he had been marked on the database as someone who has a possibility of reoffending. Patrick then drove over to Jerry's house, busted in the door, and shot him point blank, murdering him in his own home. Now, after these killings, Patrick would go on the run for a few hours, and he would later tell investigators that he had a third man he was intending on targeting later that day. But eventually, authorities were alerted after Patrick Lee's wife and children went to see him at his house, and they found his dead body. After a short manhunt, Patrick Drum was arrested. The police took him into custody, but in court, he was completely unrepentant for his actions. He had no remorse. And like I said before, he told the court that the victims deserved to die. He apologized to the families of the victims, saying that it was never his intent to hurt the families, that's just collateral damage. And he then said, as for the men, actions speak louder than words. So yeah, this is just an absolutely crazy story.
This is one of the sickest true crime cases I've heard recently, so please be warned before watching. What this woman did to 2 innocent children will make your blood boil. Lisa Snyder was a 41-year-old mother of 3 from Philadelphia. Her adorable children were 8-year-old Connor and 4-year-old Brinley. She also had an adult son named Owen. In September 2019, CCTV footage from Connor's bus captured the young boy laughing and smiling with friends. He had no idea his life was about to be taken. Lisa contacted authorities to tell them of a horrific turn of events. She said that she had found her 8-year-old child had unalived himself and his young sister by Hing in the basement of their home. When emergency services raced to the scene, they rushed the young children to hospital and placed them on life support. Tragically, they passed away just 3 days later, within minutes of each other. The story that the mum told authorities was an unlikely one. She told them that her son was being bullied and told her he planned to unalive himself. However, when police started investigating and got experts involved, it revealed a very different tale. An occupational therapist stated that the boy would not have been physically capable of doing what had been claimed. Lisa had also seemingly Googled S-side, death by Hing, and how to kill someone before the deaths. She'd also chillingly watched episodes of the crime series called I Almost Got Away With It. Not only had she murdered her 2 helpless children, but she'd also tried to frame one of the victims for it. Now, she was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and tried to plead mental illness. She was thankfully given 2 life sentences and also 8.5 to 17 years in prison for child endangerment and evidence tampering. Her son Owen called her a monster and stated she is no longer his mother.
These are videos humans were never meant to see. Okay, so we all know how terrifying and disturbing the Paris catacombs are. But if you don't know what the Paris catacombs are, I'll explain it to you real quick. In the late 18th century, major public health problems were tied to the city's cemeteries, so they started moving all the bodies underground. And it's the final resting place for about 6 million people. But the video I'm about to show you shows a guy that went very deep into the catacombs and got lost. And he just didn't get lost, he is still missing today. This video feels like its own horror movie, so here it is.
It's a point of view shot. The point of view shot is somebody just walking forwards with the camera. So basically he's filming what he's seeing very deep inside the catacombs. Other than the point of view shots are pictures of bones. Human bones. Occasionally he stops and he photographs bone, often in the shape of an arrow. These arrows point in a direction. Occasionally also he stops to photograph roomfuls of bones, which means that he's very, very deep inside the catacombs. What happened to him? Nobody knows. There are ways to match things up, to try to identify where this person was in the catacombs. At times you'll see there's signs, painted signs on the wall, which is not uncommon. People have been painting in the catacombs for centuries. So it is possible with these paintings that we may be able to retrace an itinerary to some extent. After about 40 minutes of these point of view shots and these pictures of bones, the person begins to walk faster and faster. Then he begins to run. We hear his breathing get louder and louder, as though something was scaring him. He's frightened. Occasionally he stops, perhaps to try to decide which way to run among all the many different corridors. He's running faster and faster and faster, deeper and deeper into the catacombs. And all of a sudden, he drops the camera. He just dropped. The camera just drops on the ground and keeps rolling. And you see his feet just run away. patrolling until it went empty.
Remains of a child were recently found encased in concrete in a Colorado storage unit, and now police are searching for 2 other missing children possibly connected to the case. This needs a massive trigger warning because the details of this case are horrifying. On the morning of January 10th, police were called to the King Storage Center in downtown Pueblo, Colorado, after someone found a suspicious metal container in one of the units filled with hardened concrete. The unit was being cleared out after whoever owned it stopped paying rent, and when authorities arrived and searched the metal container, they found the remains of a child encased in concrete. No information has been released about the child's identity or how or when they died, but police did say that the metal container appeared to be newer. For reasons currently unknown, this somehow led police to begin the search for 2 other missing children in the area in connection to the homicide investigation. They are siblings Jesus and Yesenia Dominguez, and they were last seen nearly 6 years ago in the summer of 2018. Jesus was 5 at the time and Yesenia was 3, and after July of that year, they vanished. They would now be around 9 or 10 years old. So far, the Pueblo Police Department has not confirmed how these 2 children are connected to the remains of the other child found in the storage unit, but they are hoping to find the kids safe. Police have talked with the parents of the missing children, and what's odd is the fact that the kids are actively missing, but their parents haven't once reported them missing. According to Sergeant Ortega with the Pueblo Police, although there was never an official missing persons report filed in regards to the 2 missing children, the department was called a few times in the past to conduct welfare checks on them. But he also said that authorities could never locate the children, and when asked why they never followed up or tried to locate them, Sergeant Ortega said that there were custody issues involving the kids and that he could not provide any further information. Since the discovery of the remains in the storage unit, police have questioned 2 people of interest in regards to the homicide, but as of today, no one has been charged with the crime. Adding to the mystery surrounding this case, police have not confirmed if the 2 persons of interest are the missing children's parents. The Pueblo County coroner will identify the child's remains, which will be released to the public once the family is properly notified. What's incredibly sad is the fact that the storage unit where the remains were found is right across the street from the Dennis Mays Judicial Building, yet no one there knew the horrors laying right across from them. If you have any information regarding this case or the disappearance of Jesus and Yesenia, please contact Detective Nicholas Lyle at 719-601-7751. Or you can remain anonymous and contact the Pueblo Crime Stoppers at 719-542-7867.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Can nightmares kill you? In the 1970s, a 15-year-old boy who had fled Cambodia to come to America started having terrifying nightmares of something chasing him. So bad that he would stay awake for days. Then one night, his parents heard him cry out in the middle of the night and ran to go check on him, but he was dead. But then the same exact thing happened in the 80s to 130 other immigrant men. These deaths were referred to as nightmare deaths and even inspired the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street. Some people hypothesized that maybe all of the men had something wrong with their hearts, or maybe it was the stress of immigrating from a war-torn area. But the one thing they all had in common was that they all cried out in their sleep before it happened. The deaths eventually tapered off, but to this day, no one knows what caused them.
I ended my boyfriend's life when I found out something I wasn't supposed to know. I'm Shayna Hubers, and I started dating Ryan Poston. I was already known for my aggressive nature, but in our relationship, I became a very controlling, obsessive, and abusive girlfriend. This went on for a while. Ryan tried to end the relationship several times, but I refused. Until one day he got tired and broke off the relationship for good. I couldn't accept that. I lost my mind and didn't leave his house. The next morning before I left, I logged into his Facebook and found out something that made me go insane. He had arranged a date with another woman. I couldn't let that happen. If he wasn't mine, he wasn't going to be anybody's, so I confronted him and shot him 6 times in the face, ending his life. Afterwards, I called the police and told them that I had killed him in self-defense, but they found no evidence that this was so. I didn't regret what I had done. I even danced and sang during the interrogations. They found evidence against me and sentenced me to life imprisonment.
This is the Russian survival experiment. During the Cold War, Russian operatives wanted to see if their citizens could survive a nuclear fallout, but the one thing they couldn't account for was how radiation was going to affect local wildlife population. So in secret, they were testing radiation on animals and breeding these wild, hyper-violent creatures. Then they recruit a group of 12 adults and keep them in a bunker for 5 days, lying to them and saying that a bomb went off and all of their friends and family didn't make it. And then on day 5, they released them back into the woods along with all of the animals that they had been manipulating. This is actually one of the only photos ever collected from the trial, and it's believed that this is actually one of the animals they were working on in secret. The only thing we know is that one of these subjects was killed by one of these creatures almost immediately, which caused the other 11 to scatter in the woods and try and survive for the next few weeks. 11 skeletal remains were eventually found, all of them torn apart, and many of them missing their left hand. But a 12th skeleton was never found, leading many to believe that someone is still out there who knows exactly what went on.
I'm the first woman in the world to have had a child with a corpse. My name is Jennifer Burrows, and at the age of 26, I was arrested because DNA tests proved that my baby was the result of an affair with a man whose autopsy I had to perform. I had unnatural relations with my patients who had died, and with one of them I had a child. According to the authorities, the man was a 57-year-old veterinarian who was driving in Texas when he was involved in a fatal accident that ended his life in March 2015. This man will never know of his son's existence, and my son will never know his father. I faced 158 charges for inappropriate interactions with 60 male cadavers, all between the ages of 17 and 71, in the 2 years prior to my arrest. The police began investigating these incidents in October, following information suggesting that I may have committed sexual abuse of cadavers. However, at the time I committed these immoral acts, there were no laws governing or prohibiting such practices, so I'm only accused of molesting lifeless corpses. But the saddest thing for me is that my child will never know his father.
I have just heard about what happened in Bosnia on Friday the 11th of August, so just last week, and it's absolutely shocking. This is Nerman, and he killed his ex-wife while live streaming the whole thing on Instagram, and apparently over 12,000 people watched the live stream. Nerman Sulemanovic has had previous encounters with the law, including assaulting a police officer and drugs trafficking. On Friday, Nerman began a live stream on Instagram with over 12,000 people watching. He said that they were about to see something that's never been seen live before, a murder. He then panned the camera around to his ex-wife, whose face was covered in blood with facial injuries. Shockingly, you could also hear their daughter crying in the background. He then shot her in the head and then panned the camera down to the floor where his child was laying in a pool of blood and said, "Someone come and save the child," before he left the house. He then went on a shooting spree, killing 2 other people, a father and son, and injuring 2 others, including a police officer. He then shot and killed himself. What's really shocked me about this story is that there were apparently people on his live stream posting supportive comments towards him, and the police have said that they could face charges.
This is what really happens after a nuclear bomb explodes. Up first, the first 1/1,000,000th of a second after a nuclear explosion, the heat is already so hot that a ball of plasma forms and reduces everything inside of it to subatomic particles. All this extreme heat then expands outward at the speed of light, completely scorching and evaporating anything and anybody that is unlucky enough to be within view. And all the people within 1.5 miles of the blast will receive 3rd-degree burns, and these burns are so extreme and bad that you don't even feel them. The shockwave is a sphere of high-pressure air that expands outwards faster than the speed of sound, which is just insane. And when it hits the ground, it reflects back up to recombine with itself, forming what's called a max stem, shaving the city down to absolutely nothing. The shockwave will then leave behind a pressure vacuum, which sucks all the air back in with hurricane-force winds. The rushing air then feeds the flames and will then start causing fire tornadoes, which will grow to hundreds of feet tall, which is literally hell on earth. This absolutely disturbing reality is called a firestorm, and is exactly what happened to the city of Hiroshima during World War II. So we all better hope a nuclear bomb never gets dropped again, because if it does, it will literally be hell on earth. You should never eat the Chick-fil-A or Popeye's chicken sandwich again. Okay, so we all had the Popeyes and Chick-fil-A chicken sandwich in our lives. But have you ever wondered what goes into these sandwiches? Well, the video I'm about to show you shows the disturbing truth of what they actually put in these sandwiches to make everybody keep coming back for them. Just watch this and let me know what you think.
The Popeyes chicken sandwich. Come to find out, they have over 40 ingredients in the Popeyes chicken sandwich. 32 of them were man-made chemicals. And I said, well, let's see what Chick-fil-A has. Over 50 chemicals in the chicken sandwich. Over 40 of them were man-made chemicals. I said, so hell, this is a dope sandwich. So they really are flipping birds over there. I mean, because there's no way in the world to justify. So whenever I seen that, I said it in a message, and someone took the clip of it and then went on the website of Chick-fil-A, had it broke down where they were clicking on it, showing all of the ingredients and these chemicals that were in it. Do you know the next day Chick-fil-A took that down off their website? So now you can't find the ingredients to the Chick-fil-A sandwich or the Popeyes chicken sandwich, because they don't want you to know that they're drugging you, that they're doping you, that they have you wanting the food not for nutritional value, but because you become addicted by the MSG and the other chemicals that they've inserted in that also are immune.
Abby Fisher was brutally murdered just 6 months after becoming a new mother after 3 rounds of IVF. Her murderer was her own husband and the father to her baby. Abby, a primary school teacher with a passion for science, was reported missing from her house in Castleford, West Yorkshire, on the 9th of July 2022 by her husband, Matthew Fisher. He then posted on Facebook saying, "Has anyone seen Abby? If you have, can you let me know or tell her to give me a ring?" He told police that Abby had been upset the night before at the prospect of returning to work, and that he'd woken up the next day to find her gone. In actual fact, he'd murdered Abby the night before and then left their daughter at home while he drove 12 miles to dump her body. Abby's partially clothed body was found the next day in a lay-by, and she was covered with bushes. She had soft tissue injuries to her head, chest and abdomen, and she'd been strangled to death. Gaffer tape found near her body had Matthew's fingerprints all over it. Police, of course, checked CCTV and they saw Matthew's car leaving Castleford around 4 a.m. and crossing over into South Yorkshire. It was then seen arriving back around 9:30 a.m., 50 minutes before he reported her missing, and his phone signal put him in the exact spot where Abby was found between 8:20 a.m. and 8:56 a.m. Matthew had sat with Abby's heartbroken parents while they hoped and prayed that she'd be found safe. He comforted them, knowing that she was already dead. Heartbreakingly, it was discovered that in the days leading up to her death, Abby had searched for things like, "Why does my husband hate me?" and "Is marriage counselling available on the NHS?" Eventually, Matthew did confess to killing Abby, saying that they'd had an argument and he'd beaten and strangled her to death after she threatened to move back in with her parents. On November 10th, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 15 years.
This is the worst cartel execution video that nobody talks about explained. The video that I'm about to explain might be one of the hardest watches, and I don't recommend searching for it. The video is about 2.5 minutes long and it's shot in the middle of the night. You see a naked man lying on the ground with his hands tied behind his back, and he also has a chain around his neck. The victim is surrounded by 2 cartel members, and the torture and the execution begins immediately. One of the cartel members is holding the victim's right leg to keep him still, and the other cartel member who is holding the knife takes the victim's left leg and begins cutting it at the knee. The victim screams in unimaginable pain, and in a matter of seconds, the victim's left leg at the knee is dismembered. And it's obvious the man doing the dismemberment has done this before. He then takes the severed leg and begins beating the victim with it. He hits him over and over again with his own leg until he moves on to the right leg, where he does the same exact process. He then cuts off the victim's right leg at the knee and begins beating him with it. And the victim during this whole process is completely conscious and aware of everything. The cartel members then take a moment to pose with the victim's severed limbs, and they then rest them on his torso. The cartel members then turn the victim over so he's lying on his stomach, and they then begin to dismember his arms. They start with his left arm at the shoulder, and at this point the victim begins screaming again, confirming that he is indeed still conscious. They then move on to the victim's right arm, and at this point the victim stops screaming and begins to groan, almost like he doesn't have the energy to scream anymore, and at this point the video concludes. This video is absolutely horrible, and many people tend to skip over and forget about this one. It's absolutely barbaric, and it's a sight you will never forget. Whatever you do, please stay curious and never go searching for this video because it will most likely mess you up. I will never get over the fact that stuff like this happens every single day on this planet.
When this girl vanished from school, it would take 9 years and another disappearance before the truth came out. Kara Kopetsky from Missouri was 17 when she vanished. It was the 4th of May 2007 and classmates had reportedly seen Kara leave school early. Now, a month prior to this, Kara had been struggling. She'd separated from her abusive boyfriend, 18-year-old Kyler Yost. The pair had had a volatile relationship, and a week prior to her disappearance, Kara actually filed a restraining order against him. This was in relation to a very disturbing incident when he had kidnapped her and refused to let her leave his car. Obviously, the investigators were very suspicious of her ex-boyfriend, but they just didn't have any concrete evidence to arrest him or charge him with a crime. It would be 9 years before there was any kind of update. In this time, Kyler had spent some time in prison for various charges, unsurprisingly including DV. He was also imprisoned for, and trigger warning here for animals, animal abuse. Now, as you may know, one strong predictor for somebody going on to become a serial killer is abusing animals in the first instance. Frustratingly, he was let out of prison though and went to a party on the 8th of September 2016. Guests at the party saw him leave with Jessica Runyons. When 21-year-old Jessica didn't return